Okay, so alright, so your footer region is not working. So let's see how we debug that and figure out how to make your footer region start working. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my themes folder to Sublime Text. So now I have the themes folder, and I can just like dig into both of the themes. We know that regions, and this is in one of the lessons, regions are defined using the .info file as well as the TPL files. So if it's defined properly in the .info file, then it shows up on this page. And it is showing up here. If it's working properly, then it'll show up here. It'll show up at the bottom of the page here. For me, it's showing up because I just fixed it, so let me unfix it real quick. Okay. There. Alright, I'm going to reset to the version of this site that you guys all have. Okay, so then when I refresh it, the footer section's gone. So for you guys, the footer section's not working. If you put a block there, it's not going to show up. So, where do we start looking? I know that it's defined correctly in the .info file, that's why it's showing up on the blocks page. But if I didn't know that, I could open the .info file and check, and I see that it is. So next up, I'll go to the TPL file we're checking, and it's the page.tpl. So it says render footer. It has that PHP line for printing the footer. I'm doing this like expedited, and it's going to be recorded. Hopefully in a shorter video. I'll cancel it after this. But so it might obviously not be as super obvious when you're doing it yourselves. So I would go look at a region that I know is working, like the header region, and compare its code to the footer region. They're pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is the machine name being printed. And if we check our .info file, we'll see, or we would see, that's the right machine name for the footer. So this line of code looks correct. Furthermore, you could just go to the Zen theme, or the base theme that we use, and look for the line where the footer region's printed, and we can compare it to ours. So ours is exactly the same as the base themes, so that line is not wrong. The next thing we do is check the region of the footer and see where it prints the content. And let's compare that to the base themes. In the base theme we have region-footer, and here's the code. If content, print content, and if. So let's put them side by side just to compare. Okay, we have if content. That's the exact same. Print content. That's the exact same. And end if. That's the exact same. So this PHP is exactly right too. The next thing the next place to check is what other custom code did we do in the theme, especially PHP code. And we did that in template.php here. Also, template.php is used for pre-processing pages, so after reading through the lesson, we would see that it's a good place to check. So we would go through all of our custom code and see if anything kind of stands out as related to the footer, especially if it potentially might do something that would hide the footer. So if we're going top to bottom, we would see here it says page footer equals array, and it has some information stored. So, I mean, that's a very likely candidate. It's setting the footer equal to something. So there's a good chance that's what's breaking the footer. If you're experienced with PHP, by looking at it, you might be able to guess what's probably going on. But let's go through the standard steps. So we're setting the footer variable equal to something. Let's check before and after. So DPM is useful for printing variables. And as you know, the Devel module needs to be enabled to use DPM. So before this custom code we wrote, I'm printing the page footer variable. After the changes we make to it, I'm going to print it again. The first argument to DPM is the variable we're printing. The second argument is a label for the variable we're printing. Okay, so all that I've changed on our site is I'm printing the footer variable before and after we change it. Let me make sure that's true. Yep. Okay, that's good. This is good. Fix the spacing. There should always be 2 spaces of indentation in Drupal code. Okay, so let's go to the home page and see if we can see our DPM call. So you see I called DPM, it shows the variable before and after. Immediately you might notice before it was an array with 4 elements, and after it's an array with 3 elements. If you're one of the people who wrote the code in class, you'd probably notice that your intention wasn't to make the array smaller. So let's expand the array before and after. Before we see system powered by, and on my site I have the powered by block in the footer. So that's probably what that is. In the after, we don't have system powered by anymore. So it looks like it removed it from the array. So we had a block in the footer array, and we don't have a block there anymore. So that's probably what went wrong with our region. In that line of code, or in that section of code, we're removing all of the blocks that we had in the footer. That's happening here. So the reason that's happening is if you look at this variable which is being set, this is the variable we just printed, and it already was an array with 4 elements. We're now setting it equal to an array with 3 elements. So we're overwriting it. instead of overwriting the entire array, we should be modifying individual array elements. So we should be setting the region key to footer, the weight to -10, and the theme wrappers to region. But we shouldn't be erasing everything else in the array. So instead of doing this, I'll just comment it out. What we should do is we should set each key value pair in the array. So, we want to set the region equal to footer. So now, instead of setting the entire footer array, so instead of overwriting this whole thing with this different array, we overwrote only this key in the array with this value. So it's like a lot more surgical. So that took care of the first line. How would we do the second one? Don't all shout at once.
Same way.
Yeah, the same way. So basically we would do the same thing. We're setting the weight here. Equal to -10. And then we're setting theme wrappers to the value that is being used, which is array region. Okay. So before deleting the DPM, I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. I'll put in another cache buster in the URL. That's what I was talking about with changing the URL to ensure the page isn't cached. So now you can already see the before had 4 elements, the after has 5. So we're not erasing elements. And when you expand them, the powered by is in the before and the after. And the items we set are also set properly, like as we set them. Additionally, if you scroll down to the footer region, my block is now showing up. So there were 2 things to be taken from this. One of which is a practical example of using DPM. It's good sometimes for printing before and after variables, and the labels can be useful for seeing exactly which variable you're looking at. And it's just a very nice UI for looking through arrays. The second thing is to take care when you are working with arrays, or when you're setting something equal to an array. If you just set it equal to an array directly, you're going to overwrite the previous array. There are multiple ways of adding to an array instead of overwriting one. This one's just probably the most obvious or easy to comprehend. So with that done, you just remove the DPM statement. Now that we're done debugging, we remove the debugging code and save it, and the theme works, or the region is now fixed and usable. Check a git diff, shows the before and after, and then you can commit your fix to this. So I'm not going to commit it. Farah said she'll do this one, and then I'll merge it in.